Deep in the Ethiopian highlands, a massive concrete structure rises from the Blue Nile River. This is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Africa's largest hydroelectric project and one of the most controversial infrastructure developments in modern history. Today we'll explore how this $5 billion megaproject is reshaping the future of agriculture across three nations. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD, stands 170 meters tall and stretches 1,800 meters across the Blue Nile. With a reservoir capacity of 74 cubic kilometers, that's nearly twice the size of Ethiopia's largest lake. This engineering marvel generates 5,150 megawatts of electricity. But behind these impressive numbers lies a complex story of regional cooperation, conflict, and the future of agriculture in the Nile basin. Construction began in 2011, and the dam finally reached completion in late 2024, fundamentally altering the flow of the Blue Nile that has sustained civilizations for millennia. Before we dive into the project's agricultural impact, let's first take a look at the Nile River. For some of this video, we will rotate the map by 90 degrees so that we can better display the course of the Nile. The Nile River has a length of about 6,650 kilometers, or 4,130 miles, and is regarded as one of the two biggest rivers in the world. The Nile has two main tributaries, the Blue and the White Nile. The White Nile is hereby considered as the source river. It is longer and rises in East Africa, and therefore determines the total length of the Nile. Lake Victoria is often referred to as the origin, but this lake itself has many tributaries of considerable size. The Blue Nile, on the other hand, has its origins in Lake Tana in Ethiopia. Although it is not considered to be the source river, it contributes to a much greater amount of water flow in the Nile. Of all the water that reaches downriver Egypt, about 60% annually comes from the Blue Nile. And during the rainy months between June and September, 80% of the water originates from here. The two rivers meet north of Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. Here, the reason for both names become clear. The White Nile is named after its lighter gray color, which is a result of clay sediments in the water. For countries along the Nile, the river is of significant importance. However, dependency on the Nile also creates conflicts between nations. Let's take a look at the water situation in these countries. Ethiopia, Uganda, and Tanzania suffer water stress, which means that there are fewer than 1,700 cubic meters of water per person annually available. In Burundi, Rwanda, South Sudan, Sudan, and Egypt, it is even less than 1,000 cubic meters of water, an amount at which it is considered water scarcity. Securing water supply in these countries is also a major challenge because of fast-growing populations. Nevertheless, it is important to say that there are very different reasons for the difficult water supply. For example, in Egypt there is a physical water scarcity. This means that there simply isn't enough water available in the region. About 90% of the country is desert, and the Nile is the only large source of fresh water. Since 97% of Egypt's water supply comes from the Nile, the country is much more dependent on the river than the countries from which the river originates. Just how significantly the river determines life in Egypt can be seen on this map, which shows the country's population density. A whopping 98% of Egypt's population lives on just 3% of the country's territory. This is the case in Ethiopia, where most of the water in the Nile comes from. However, this Nile water is mostly from the rainy summer months, so it's seasonal. And more importantly, the amount of precipitation during that time is variable, resulting in a number of problems. The main use of fresh water in all countries we're talking about is agriculture, which is complicated by unpredictable rainfalls. Due to climate change, it can be assumed that the number of extreme weather events will increase. For countries like Ethiopia, a flood that makes large areas of agricultural land unusable is just as much a problem as increasing droughts. Nevertheless, there is also a lack of drinking water. Ethiopia is one of the poorest countries in the world, and especially in rural areas. It lacks in sanitation infrastructure, which in turn leads to water pollution. To understand GERD's impact, we must first grasp what's at stake agriculturally. The Blue Nile provides about 80% of the Nile's flow during flood season, delivering nutrient-rich sediments that have fertilized Egyptian and Sudanese farmlands for thousands of years. Egypt depends on the Nile for 90% of its water supply, supporting 2 million farmers whose livelihoods hang in the balance. In Sudan, seasonal flooding has traditionally supported flood recession agriculture, a practice where farmers plant crops as floodwaters recede, leaving behind fertile, moist soil. The dam will regulate the flow of the Blue Nile as it heads into Sudan. And the Sudanese are very happy about that at the moment. Depending on the season, the river floods, or it's too low. A steady year-round flow of water will significantly boost harvests. But downstream on the Nile in Egypt is where there's potential for conflict over Ethiopia's plans. From above, you can see how much Egypt depends on the Nile. The country is pretty much all deserts. The only strip of color is the blue of the Nile and the green of its cultivated banks. 90% of Egypt's water comes from it. One study suggests that if the dam's lake in Ethiopia is filled quickly, which means over 3 years, then that would divert enough water to kill off 51% of Egypt's farmland. And when you consider that Egypt's population is expected to hit 117 million in 2030, a 30% increase from now, you can see why its government is so worried about Ethiopia's damage. For Ethiopia, GERD represents agricultural transformation through rural electrification. With only 44% of Ethiopians having access to electricity, the dam promises to power irrigation systems, food processing facilities, and agricultural machinery across the country. Ethiopia argues the dam will actually benefit downstream agriculture by regulating water flow year-round, reducing destructive seasonal flooding while ensuring steady water supply during dry periods. The dam's filling process, completed over 5 phases from 2020 to 2024, created the first major test of agricultural impacts. During filling, Ethiopia temporarily reduced downstream water flow by storing 74 cubic kilometers of water, equivalent to 1.5 years of the Blue Nile's average annual flow. Studies warn this could temporarily affect 2 million Egyptian farmers and reduce Egypt's hydroelectric generation by 25 to 40%, though hydropower represents less than 12% of Egypt's total electricity production, translating to only a 3% overall reduction in national power generation. GERD's benefits for agriculture are significant and multifaceted. The dam dramatically reduces seasonal flooding downstream, protecting agricultural settlements and infrastructure while allowing for more predictable farming cycles. By trapping silt, GERD extends the useful lifetime of downstream dams like Sudan's Reshape Dam and Egypt's Aswan High Dam, maintaining their agricultural water storage capacity. Located in the cooler Ethiopian highlands, GERD's reservoir is said to lose only 3% of its water to evaporation annually, compared to 12% lost by Egypt's Lake Nasser. This efficiency could increase water availability downstream by up to 5%. The reservoir supports up to 7,000 tons of annual fish production and creates tourism potential, diversifying rural economies. However, significant agricultural challenges remain. Egypt fears lasting decreases in water availability due to reservoir evaporation and Ethiopia's water retention policies. Any reduction in Nile flow directly threatens Egyptian agriculture, which operates on extremely thin water margins. In Sudan, communities practicing traditional flood recession agriculture face disruption as predictable seasonal flooding patterns change. These farming systems, developed over centuries, must adapt to more regulated water flows. During GERD's filling phase, reduced downstream flows stressed agricultural systems. While spread over several years, this period required careful coordination that wasn't always achieved. Ethiopia's reliance on the seasonal rains to fill GERD during drought years could reduce water available for downstream agriculture when it's needed most. The agricultural implications have driven intense regional tensions. Egypt, viewing any reduction in Nile water as an existential threat to its food security, previously demanded halt to construction and increased water guarantees. Sudan's position has shifted over time, initially supporting GERD for its flood control benefits, but later aligning with Egypt amid concerns about agricultural disruption and electricity purchase agreements. Military posturing, including Egypt-Sudan joint exercises and Ethiopia's installation of air defense systems at the dam, reflects how agricultural water security has become a matter of national security. The future of Nile Basin agriculture depends on regional cooperation and technological adaptation. Successful coordination could create a cascaded system where GERD and Sudan's Reshape Dam work together for optimal hydropower generation and enhanced irrigation. Advanced irrigation technologies, water-efficient farming practices, and diversified agricultural systems offer pathways to maintain food security while adapting to GERD's operational reality. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam represents both the promise and peril of large-scale infrastructure development. While it offers Ethiopia a path to energy security and agricultural modernization, its impacts on downstream farming communities remain a source of regional tension. As the Blue Nile continues to flow through this new reality, the challenge remains: can three nations find a way to share the river's bounty fairly, ensuring food security for all while building a more prosperous future?